Hello everyone. In this video, we're going to go over Odoo reporting. We're going to look at all aspects of Odoo reporting, but we're going to do a deep dive into Odoo Sheets, the backbone of Odoo dashboards. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Odoo Sheets, it's essentially a Sheets application built into Odoo that allows you to build spreadsheet-like reports and save them as custom dashboards for yourself or other employees. And you can leverage real-time data across the system in order to build out those reports. Now, I'm excited to do this video because Odoo Sheets is underutilized and extremely powerful. Oftentimes, people come to us to build out custom reports in a PDF format or a way to create extra fields inside of their system. And I'm here to tell you that you can do a lot of this reporting just with Odoo Sheets if you take the time to learn a few critical aspects of how the system works and how the Odoo Sheet functions. Now, it's not going to replace all of your reports, but it's not practical to add different calculated fields across the system for every single person's reports. So you often get people asking for specific PDF reports sent to their inbox or just access to the report in the system. Now, your end users, the people who use the system on a day-to-day basis to do their job, can leverage the Sheets application to build their own reports utilizing data from across the system instead of having to rely on anyone from IT or any other department in order to extract that data. So the first thing I want to do before we actually jump into creating a spreadsheet and creating a dashboard is look at where the data comes from. Now, most of you are probably familiar with Odoo and how the reporting works, but I do want to do a quick summary for those of you who may not know or just may be new to Odoo. So the first thing to mention is that I'm in a demo environment. I'm going to switch to a more specific environment a little bit later, and I have a template built out of what we want to build using Odoo Sheets. So first, in this demonstration environment, let's look at some of the out-of-the-box reporting. Now, unique to Odoo, most of the things you're looking for on an everyday basis, I would estimate it at about 80% of the data that you need is just going to be readily available in every single one of the applications. So if we click on CRM, there's going to be reports built into the CRM application. The same thing is true for sales, point of sale, subscriptions, field service, planning, help desk, and every other application. So let's take a look at sales. Once we click into sales, we'll see a reporting tab at the top of our screen, and we can go into any of these default reports, whether it's sales, sales by salesperson, product sales, customer information, or commissions. Not only that, we'll go there in just a second, but on every list view that you see here, just our quotations, you'll see to the right side of the screen our different views. So these views might be pivot table views or graph views, often having much of the same information that you'll find in these reports. So I can go to a pivot table view here and manipulate this to see exactly what I want to see, but I'll do that from our reporting tab at the top by going to sales. Now, once we click into sales, we're just going to be brought to a graph view, and you're going to see the sales increase over time. We can manipulate these with filters at the top. So most of the time when you're looking for a report, you might want to see, sales by month. And that's quick and easy to do in Odoo. You don't need any special knowledge. You literally navigate to the sales, you select your measurement. We're looking at quantity ordered. Maybe we want to do quantity or total price instead on this graph view. We're looking at non-recurring. I'll just remove all of my filters. So now it's showing me everything. Let's say I just want to see what our quotations look like that are sent out to our customers right now. So I'll just look at quotes. And now we have a graph view of the quotes by month. And maybe I want to convert that and look at sales orders. So quickly, I can see sales orders. I'm looking at all time here, but maybe I just want to do January and December. So now I can update that. Of course, you see that there's no data in the system currently for those months. So I will just say the entire 25 and 24 so that we can get some data back here. Now from here, I can manipulate this. I'm looking at a line chart here, but maybe I want to do a pie chart and look at it by month, or a line chart, or a bar graph rather. I can change the descending or ascending order, and then I can filter and group this by whatever I want to look at. So right now I have a filter as sales orders. The order date is in 2024 or 2025. I can go here and say I want to also group this by salesperson. So now I have orders in 2025 grouped by salesperson in just a matter of seconds. Now, this is probably trivial for most people watching this video. However, I'm often surprised at the lack of this functionality in many other systems, so it's important to show the broader audience. Now I'm going to take it one step further and look at this from a pivot table view, which is extremely powerful. So now I can navigate to my right and go into a pivot table view. I'm going to remove my filters once again, just refresh all that data. Now at the top, what we have is measurements. I can add all of these different measurements. I have quantity ordered, I can get the total price, maybe quantity delivered, and I can reorder these by the order that I select them in. So let's say that we want to get our quantity ordered, quantity delivered, quantity invoiced, and our total. That's our total. These are our total numbers. I can switch the axis if I want to. Well, I don't have anything that I'm filtering on right now, just the measurements, but we'll look at that in a second. Now let's say that I want to do this by product. So on the left side of the screen, I want to do product. Now it's showing me all of my products and it's extremely fast. At the top of my screen, I want to group this by salesperson. Now I see the product sold by salesperson. Now what if I wanted to change this and say, first I want to do our product category. So I can click on product category, and then I want to do product, and we'll also do product variant in case they have any product variants. Then I can expand all, and we'll see all the sales by person, by product category, by product, then by variant in just a matter of seconds. I can flip these axes. Now we have our salespeople on the left side. Now, of course, this is a bit much here what I'm looking at, but I'm just trying to show how powerful it is. And we can add any measurements we want, and we can go many, many levels deep, and there also are a ton of fields that you can group this by. So whether it's the order reference, the customer entity, the campaign that was being ran, the source of these orders, the warehouse these orders are being sent to, etc. Now, from here, you can get a lot of information you need. You can also download this right to an Excel file and use it on your local machine and manipulate this however you see fit. But the real power comes when you insert any of this information into an Odoo spreadsheet so that you can then make a dashboard. So from here, I can insert this pivot table into a spreadsheet, which will open up the spreadsheet application. We won't do it right now because we'll do it a little bit later. You can also insert list views into your spreadsheets as well. So not only pivot tables, but you can do list views here. So we have our list. I can go to this action icon, go to spreadsheet, and put insert list into a spreadsheet to get all of this data. And I can also do the same thing with this graph here. Now, that's not all. Once you insert this data, it's not static. You can make it so it's dynamic and continuously updates so you can reference fields into the future and build out your dashboard one time and utilize all of the active data in the system in real time. As soon as you go back to that dashboard, it will be updated. So I keep speaking about dashboards. Let's take a look at what they look like. Now I'm going to go back to our dashboard, our Odoo dashboard, and I'm going to click into the dashboards application. So clicking into the dashboard application here, again in a demo environment with lots of demo data, you're going to see on the left side of the screen, these are all of the default dashboards that Odoo provides out of the box. So depending on the applications you have installed, you'll see a subset of these dashboards. So we have our sales dashboard, product information, point of sale sales. Under subscription, we have our MRR retention. We have leads in our pipeline and analysis of our leads. For accounting, we have specific ratio analysis for all of your accounting benchmarks. Logistics, services, marketing, and so on. So all of your data you need. Now let's go back to something that everyone understands, so we'll go to sales. At the top of your screen, you'll see filters. So you can filter this data for a specific item that you're looking for. So if I want to see all of my product sales for our bolt, well, there we go, we have 0. Let's look for something that we actually sold. So I'll do my roofing product. So I'll search for roofing here. Now we see we have one order. We have 72,000 in revenue. Down below, we have all of this dynamic list being populated. I can remove my filter. I can filter this by a category. So maybe we just do clothes. And let's try to find one that has some. So let's do furniture. Nope, we don't have any furniture. Let's see top categories if we have that. So home construction. So let's do home construction. So now we have some sales in home construction, 4 orders, revenue 311,000, average order size, top sales orders. Now what's even more interesting is that even this is not dynamic. You can actually click into all of these and drill into the actual orders. So here I have my top sales orders. I can click on it. It'll bring me right to that sale order number 83 that was on my list. And then from here, I have access to the entire system, of course. I can go back to my dashboard, my filters saved. I can add additional filters. So maybe I want to see home construction in just our sales team, maybe by a specific person or a source. So you can combine these. Now, right here, I'm just looking at the last 90 days, but I can also do the last 3 years, last 12 months, etc. At the right of our screen, we'll be able to share this information. So if I click on share here, it's going to generate a sharing link that I can publish. This is going to be a frozen version. So whatever you see here is going to be static. You can share it with outside people. So if your boss asks for a snapshot of some sales, you can quickly come into here, copy this link, and send it to them via Messenger, and they will have access to this dashboard that you're looking at. Now, all of these dashboards are built on the back of Odoo Sheets, and it's pulling real-time data. As soon as we make a sale and we come back to our dashboard, this will update. So let's look at what it looks like on the back end. So I'm going to go through one of these. We can stick with our sales here. You'll see a little pencil here to edit it. We can remove this so we see a full screen, just as a quick mention. So I'm going to click on edit here, or we can go to configurations, dashboards, and we can click into, for example, sales. And our sales, product, point of sale, restaurant, and rental information are here. You can download this as a JSON to get all of the data. You can specify which groups have access rights to this. So here we see sales/administrator. So anyone who's an administrator in the sales application has access to this sales dashboard, and you can fine tune them. Now you can click on edit here to bring you to a spreadsheet. One thing that I do want to mention before I get into the Sheets application is that at the top of your screen, you also have your own personalized dashboard that is different from this dashboard here. So if I were to go into a graph view somewhere, let's say we go into CRM this time, we go to reporting and we look at our forecast screen, and I want to look at this in a graph view. I'm just pulling a random graph here. I can add this to my dashboard. So add to my dashboard, I'll click on add here. It's going to add to my dashboard. I can go to find another report that I'm going to often look at. Let's say I want to also look at some of our MRR data. So our MRR breakdown. I'm going to go here and click on dashboard, add to my dashboard. Now I'll refresh my screen and go into my personalized dashboard to view those reports. So my dashboard is now going to have those 2 reports that I'm often going to reference back to, and I can manipulate how I view these. So if I want to drag and drop, I can insert list views, whatever I want here that I'm going to often reference back to as my personalized dashboard. All right, just wanted to take a quick detour to mention that because it is helpful as well. But let's go back to our dashboards here, go into sales, and we're going to our sales spreadsheet. So now this is Odoo Sheets. It looks very familiar, looks very much like a Google Sheet or an Excel. You can do many of the same things that you can do in either of those applications right here inside the system with real-time data. Now, all of this data is being pulled from different pivot tables and lists that were inserted into this default view. So we have our dashboard here, and then on the next tab, we have our next sheet, we have our data. And there's just a few different data points that's making up all of our numbers at the top of our screen. Some of them are more complex than the other. It just really depends on what you're building out. Now from here, I want to look at how this data is being pulled in. So if I click on one of these, for example, the revenue, you'll see that it's a custom formula. So in Odoo Sheets, there's custom formulas to reference pivot tables and list view that you enter into this sheet. By going to that pivot table and clicking insert into a spreadsheet, that data becomes available. You can then manipulate that data, and then you can use it however you see fit. So just to explain this, this function here, it's pivot.value. The first thing is the pivot ID. It's the 11th pivot table that we entered into here. We're looking at the field measure name. So the measure name is price total. I'm looking for the state. So the state of the sale order, which is in the state sale. And it's going to help us and give us the different options here. So now I'm looking at the subtotal for all sales inside of this pivot table. And that's giving me the current sales here. Now this works, again, in real time. So as we make a sale, this value updates, our dashboard updates. We're going to go into this in complete detail, so no need to worry about it too much right now. I just wanted to show you that it does have a custom formula here. Now, then we can create different widgets like this that reference some of the fields that we have here. So now let's take a step back and just go through generally all of the functionality inside of the Spreadsheets application. So first, under File, our menu, we can make a copy of the sheet. We can download it. We can see the revision history or the version history. We can take a snapshot of this. We can print it out. We can download it as JSON, and then we can bring up some settings, which is just some general settings. From edit, just kind of some of the default ones: undo, redo, copy, cut, paste, paste special, find and replace, and delete. From the view here, we can show grid lines, comments, and look at formulas. So now if I go back and remove these formulas, if I right click on something, you can insert a comment. So I can add a comment here that other people can view, and I can tag my fellow employees if we're working on the same spreadsheet at the same time. Back to this view here, we can freeze columns and rows. This irregularity map is going to show us any anomalies in our data. So here it's just going to try to predict analyze our formulas and patterns to highlight any inconsistencies. I'm going to turn that off, just a helpful tool. Again, we can see all of our comments. Then from insert, we can insert a row, column, cells, sheets. We can insert charts, pivot tables, images, other tables, functions. So these are all the functions that are available. We can take a second to go through some of them, but you'll see all of the default functions that you would find in most sheet applications. You have your array functions, you have your VLOOKUP, XLOOKUPs, matching, ifs and if statements. You have these Odoo specific formulas, which we'll talk more about, but essentially these allow you to pull in different values for pivot tables as well as different values for lists. More importantly, it allows you to build out or pull in different data from financial, your GL. So you can get credit balances, debit balances, the balance of an account, the currency exchange rate, account groups, fiscal year end and start, and these are built in formulas so that you can quickly pull that data. Add hyperlinks, we have our text, so we can join text, etc. And some statistical analysis. So all the formulas you may need to create any type of reports, you can do that right from the system. Now that's enough for functions. Again, you can insert everything that you would probably need: checklist, drop-down list, insert a comment from the formatting, all of your default formatting, conditional formatting as well. And then from data, you'll be able to view all of the inserted data pivot tables, list views, charts, and graphs. You can refresh the data. You can reinsert the data. You can look at your filters, which we'll talk more about. They're available at the right side of the screen. So I know I just kind of rambled there for a bit. Just wanted to walk you through some of those menu items so you're familiar. And then at the top here, you see your different formatting options, merging cells, formatting cells, and then of course your formula at the right side of the screen, and then your filter if you want to make something filterable. Now at the right, it's going to auto-save for us. It's going to say whether or not it's published. We can share, again, we can share a frozen spreadsheet so someone else can view this from outside the system, and then we'll see our filters. Now these filters correlate with the filters that we've seen at the top of our dashboard, but they can also be used right from the spreadsheet. So you don't necessarily have to utilize a dashboard. You can just have your own personal spreadsheet and then be able to manipulate your filters on the right, which will filter out all your data sets that you've entered into the system, which are going to fine tune the numbers that we're looking at, which will update our dashboard or any view that we've created. So there's a lot here and it's extremely powerful. And I think the best way to show you the power is to go through an example of building out a new spreadsheet, a new dashboard that we might want to utilize. Now the possibilities are basically your imagination. So whatever you can imagine that you want to build out, you probably can do it as long as you have that data readily available. So I'm going to go into a different environment. And we're going to look at a scenario where I want to pull in different key metrics about my products so I can understand better how I should order, right? So we might have reordering rules. We might want to understand how a specific product is doing. And we don't want to look at one-dimensional data where we're just looking at movements of products. We want to consider sales metrics, financial metrics, and of course our inventory metrics. Now there's so much that can be done, but this is a relatively simple example where we can pull in the data in the amount of time that the video is going to take and that you're going to actually watch. So I wanted to make sure that it's feasible while going over some of the key aspects of the actual environment. So what we're going to build. First, we're going to build a dashboard. The dashboard is going to have several filters. We're going to look for product, our warehouses, and our date range that we want to consider. We're going to pull in inventory metrics. So what's on hand? This is going to be live metrics. So as of today, so on hand or as of whenever you're viewing this, the total on hand, the total available, total reserved, our stock coverage based on our sales data. So we're going to create a custom formula for that. We'll look at our sales metrics, which is going to be the number of units sold within a given period, the units sold within a given previous period and the previous period before that. We'll calculate our average growth over those years, and we'll put that into a key indicator. We'll look at our financial metrics. So we'll look at our revenue within that period, our total cost, our total margin, and any discounts that were applicable. And then just to kind of round this out and make sure that we show everything, we'll look at inserting a list view with the different inventory resupplies. So to do this, we're going to have to add several different pivot tables and list views to our environment. We're going to have to build out a dashboard and make some calculations that we reference for all of these KPIs. So let's go over to our custom environment and let's start building this. We'll often reference back to it, and I haven't gone through this actual example, so we might run into some issues, but we'll troubleshoot on the way. All right, so now we're in our environment. We'll start by creating a new dashboard or a new sheet. So we're going to go into our Documents application. We're going to click on New at the top left corner and click on New Spreadsheet. I'll just create a blank spreadsheet and click on Create. We'll name this Purchase or Product Dashboard. And we'll just name this our dashboard, and we'll enter in or insert in any of our pivot tables and list views. So we just have a blank dashboard for now, and we'll leave everything as is. So now I'm going to go back to our dashboard. I'm going to scroll over and see what the first thing is that we need. So the way that you want to think about Odoo and how to build out these sheets is first you want to understand what kind of metrics do you want. Then you have to find a place in the system where these metrics exist, which oftentimes they exist. Or you need to figure out what the formula is based on the metrics that you have at your disposal in order to calculate this. So for example, I know in the system just off the top of my head that I can find on hand, available, and reserved, but it's not going to show me my stock coverage. But that's easily calculable based on our sales metrics divided by the stock that we have on hand. So first, I need to find these inventory metrics. And to do that, I'm going to go into the inventory application and I'm going to look for some of our reports. Now, this is the way that you will do it, right? As you get more familiar with the system, you'll know where to find these reports. First, I'm going to go into inventory. I'm going to go to reporting, and then I have a few different reports that I can look at. For this example, let's start with stock, and let's see how we would think about this. Right, I'm going to go into stock. I know I want a pivot table view with this information, so this is not going to do it. I can go then to locations, and now I have location data for all of my products, so this might be what I'm looking for. You also have to decide how are you filtering and grouping your data, right? You might want to say, I want to filter this by warehouse, or maybe by sales team, or maybe by company, and all of those things will change the way you want to build out your spreadsheet. In this example, I'm in a single company environment with multiple different stores or warehouses. You can also think of this as multiple branches for multiple stores, but I don't have branches turned on. I just have warehouses just for simplicity of this video. So on the right side of the screen, I can see that I have a list view, a pivot table view, and a graph view. So now we can look at how we can determine if this is going to be the data that we need. So I know that I want to group this by location, and by location I mean warehouse. So maybe we change this to warehouse. I need my product data. I need to be able to set date ranges. I'm going to need my on-hand, available, and reserved. So here I want to see what my measurements are. So in my measurements, I see a quantity field, so that's the number of units we have. or maybe we have available quantity. So we have total quantity, available quantity, and reserve quantity. So that's going to give me a lot of the information I'm looking for. At the top, this is filtering by locations, but I think I'd rather do warehouse just because it's more straightforward. So let me see if I can group this by warehouse. So now I have my warehouse data. And on the left side of the screen, I have all of my product variants. So here I have some just generic product variants that I added in. So let's verify. If we go back, if I set the warehouse, I'll be able to filter that down. I can filter that down by product. And if I go here, I can filter by date range if necessary. But for this data, because we're just going to get the total data, we don't need to filter by date range. So I think this should be what we need for our inventory metrics. So I'm just going to go ahead and insert this into our spreadsheet. We can rename this, and I'm going to call this our inventory metrics. And I'm going to insert this into our product dashboard. So I'll click on confirm here. Now it's going to load right into my previous sheet that I've created. And you're going to see all of that data from the pivot table automatically finds its way onto this sheet. And then on the right side of the screen, we have all of our pivot table information. So let's take a minute to look at some of this. If I click on any of these fields, you're going to see a value. So it's pivot.value. For example, here I'm saying pivot.value. This is number 1, which is the first pivot table I've inserted. This is giving me the measurement quantity sum. And you can see on the right side of the screen, I have my measurements. This one's called quantity, and it's summing my items. Then I have my product ID, so the domain, which is the product ID. The product ID for product A read small is 5, so I'm saying product ID is 5. And I'm also looking at warehouse ID equals 1. So store 1, which is our warehouse 1, 9 units inside of store 1 for quantity for our product A read small. All dynamic and all will update in real time. Now from the right side of the screen, I'm going to have a few different options here. I'm going to have my columns that I can add additional columns based on this data. Now keep in mind, right now I added a static pivot table. So there's a difference between dynamic and static. Static doesn't mean it's not going to update. It just means that each cell is keyed in here. Now I can remove this entire thing and I can say insert, or rather go to my data, and I'm going to reinsert a dynamic pivot table as opposed to the static pivot table, which I added at first. So if I add this pivot table, you're going to see that it's just referencing pivot 1, right? Just like many other formulas in Excel. So this whole thing is just getting auto-populated based on just pulling in pivot 1. Now I can still reference those exact fields that I want, but this will be more dynamic in terms of if I wanted to add another column here. Let's say I wanted to add a, let's see, a product category. So none of these have product categories, so it's not adding anything. Let's add a row instead. So maybe we wanted to do the product template as well. So now you see the product template automatically get added. So I'll remove that because I don't need it. The next thing I want to look at is measurements. So down below under measurements, what we can do is now create custom measurements based on this data or any other data that's available inside of my spreadsheet. So what we're going to do later is add a measurement to understand our quantity, or rather, we're going to understand our stock coverage. But in order to do that, we're going to need some sales data. So I'll wait just a bit to do that. But for example, if we were to add a measurement here, I can go down to add a calculated measurement. So oftentimes, some data that we need is just a simple math formula that, it might be unique to you, or you might have a specific way of calculating it. So if I wanted to say, I'm going to take the quantity sum, and for whatever reason, I'm going to divide it by 5. And that's what I want on this calculated field. And I'm going to name this, test field. So now my test field here has my sum divided by 5. And that can be anything. It can be a reference to another pivot table. It can be a reference to a static list of different formulas that I have, or different values, so that I can utilize it into my calculation and measurement. So I can make this dynamic, and then I'll be able to reference this as much as I need. Now underneath my domain, you can see my domain is just whatever I had as my domain when I added this pivot table, but I can also edit it right from here. So my location type is an internal location, so I'm only looking at internal locations for this specific pivot table here. I can also defer updates so it doesn't update automatically. Now I'm going to remove this test field, and this is the data I need, so I'm just going to leave it here for now, and we're going to go back and look at what other data we need. So next thing we need is our sales metrics, and I'm pretty certain that this is going to be available in the sales module. So I'm going to look at our sales module. We're going to get our units sold, and we're going to look at how we can get the year -1 and year -2 data. Keep in mind, I'm in a demo environment that doesn't necessarily have all this data, so these might be 0, but we can still look at how we can add them. And then we see our average growth, which again will most likely be a calculation based on the data that we have in the system. So let's go out. We'll go to our spreadsheet, or rather to our dashboard. We'll go into sales, we'll go into reporting, and we'll look at our sales report. This time I'm also going to go into a pivot table. And we know that we're going to filter down by product, warehouse, and date range. So what I want to do from here is first I'm going to add my product variant like we had before, because we want a lot of these pivot tables to match up. At the top, I'm going to make sure that we can filter by warehouse, which we can. So now I have my product data grouped by warehouse. This is showing me quantity ordered. That's not what I want. I want our, let's do quantity ordered. So this is going to be our units sold, so whatever the quantity is that we ordered. We can also do quantity delivered so that we can see the delta. Maybe we want to do a few. So what are the quantity ordered versus what we were actually able to deliver, so that we can see what we failed to deliver. But for this, we'll just keep it simple, and we'll say that we're just going to look at ordered quantities to get this data. So let's click on Insert into Spreadsheet here, and we're going to again add that to our product dashboard. So now we have that data just like we had before. We see all of our columns, rows, and measurements, and then we have our domain here, which is status not equal to canceled, status not in quotation canceled or quotation sent, and then we have our order date, which I'm actually going to remove our order date because I don't want to specify that. We'll use some filters to specify that a little bit later. All right, so the last thing we need is our financial metrics, and this is sales analysis by warehouse. I'm actually going to rename this, and we're going to call this our sales metrics, just to keep it consistent. And maybe I want to rename this, so I can just right click and click and rename it to sales metrics. And I'll say this is pivot number 2, so we know we can reference it easily. And if I right click this, I can also change the color if I wanted to. We'll do a nice little Odoo purple. So I'll go back, and we have our sales metrics. We're going to be able to get our units sold. We'll look at how we can get these other formulas a little bit later. The next thing we want is our financial metrics, which we can get from many places in the system, but we'll probably be able to get this from our sales reporting. So let's take a look at if we can get it from our sales reporting. Now you can use the sales reporting and add everything at once, but just for the sake of this video, let's go into sales. We'll go into reporting again and see if we can get, we need our financial metrics. So we need our revenue, we need costs, we need margin, and we need discounts. So let's see, we have discounts, we have unit price, we don't have cost. So we can elect to find this somewhere else. So if we want to understand cost, we're going to have to either calculate it. And we also don't have margins, but I don't believe I have margins turned on in this system. So let's go and see if we can find this somewhere else. So if we actually go to sales, let's do products, and maybe we have it here. No, we have the same. So we have discount, quantity. Okay, so let me go into configurations. I'm going to turn on margins, and I'm going to save that. So I'll give that a second to install and see if it adds anything to our pivot table views. So I'll go to my pivot table, and now we have margin. So quantity ordered, total. Now I don't have any cost price set up in the system for our product, so all the costs were based at 0. So our margin is basically our total revenue. So this is going to be a bit skewed, but of course this margin can be calculated, or the cost can be calculated based on our margin. So we can just look at sales price minus our margin in dollars here, so we can get our cost price, which is going to be pretty simple to calculate. And of course that's all going to be 0. But let's just do it anyway. So we have our product variance on the left. At the top, I'm going to group this by warehouse. And I don't need our quantity ordered in this example. I just need our margin and our total. So, all right. We also want our discount. So discount in percentage. And here we have margin. And we'll do this in dollars just to keep it simple. Of course, we can calculate that very easily. One thing that I forgot to mention earlier is that all of these are clickable as well. So if we wanted to click into this total here or product A, 1 unit, I can click on it. It's going to bring me to that actual record. So from here, I'm going to insert this into my spreadsheet. I'm going to name this financial metrics. And I'm going to select our product dashboard and click on confirm. So now I have basically all of the data I need except this inventory resupplies. So in order to get this inventory resupply, what we're going to do is pull in a list view, and this is just going to auto-populate some of the recent inventory resupplies. So I'm going to go to our inventory screen once again. I'm going to go to reporting. I'm going to look at our moves history, and our moves history is going to show us all of the product moves. And what we're looking at specifically is resupplies. So I'm going to say incoming. I can look at to do and done. So depending on what I want to look at, these are all of the resupplies incoming to our specific locations and warehouses. So if I can group this by a specific warehouse, that would be very helpful to us. If I go to moves analysis, let's look at this in a list view. I will be able to group this by warehouse, so I'll use this instead. And I'm going to look at only incoming. And I can filter this further. So depending on the environment you're in, here I just sent everything from a vendor right to a store, but you might have a central warehouse where you want to look at all of the products that were received to a store from the central warehouse. So really depending on what you want to look at, you're going to fine tune your filter here. So from here, I'm going to click on insert, and I'm going to insert this list into a spreadsheet. I'm going to put this in my demo or our product dashboard. And how many records do we want to pull? Let's just say we're going to pull the first 100 records. You can set any value here. I only have 64 records. So I'm going to call this our inventory resupplies. And confirm. Now I have that data available to me as well. Now, a couple things to mention about this list view. Just for future references, we won't need it here. But depending on how many items you're looking at or referring to, list views are going to be extremely helpful because you can really do anything you want in terms of adding fields. So if I wanted to insert a new list here and I wanted to get the product ID, or rather the ID of this record, I could insert a column left, and right here I see my Odoo list. I'm just going to paste that in, and instead of the field name, you'll see all of the fields on that record. So I can do ID here, and that's the ID of this record. I can drag this down all the way to my bottom of my list, have my records, and you'll see that this is date schedule. This is a list header. I can paste this in and replace the date with ID. And now I have my ID field. I can make this all match if I wanted to, but it's not super important. I don't really need this, so I'm just going to delete column A. All right, so we have all of that data. Or one last thing to mention here is that you may need to drag this down periodically. This list makes sense. Like, let's say we're pulling in warehouses. Warehouses are not going to update often, so I'm just going to pull in warehouses and I can reference that list for whatever the data points that I need. You can also sometimes just paste in static lists that you can reference for different parts of your dashboard. Just really anything that you would necessarily do in Excel, right? You might have just a list that you're referencing for different reasons. You can do the same thing here. But anyway, I have my inventory resupply, my financial metrics, my sales metrics, my inventory metrics, and my dashboard that I have yet to build. So let's start by building our dashboard. Now, the first thing we're going to want to do is we can enter in our different filters. So to do that, we go to the top of our screen here. We can add a new filter. Our first one is our product. So we're going to do it based on a relation. So here, the relation is going to, we'll just call it product. That's the label. And the related model is going to be product variant because that's what we're looking at. We can select a default value, so what products we want to look at. We can restrict the value to a specific set of domain. So here, let's just say we only want physical goods. So I'll say product type is equal to goods. So that's only going to allow me to select physical goods. Then our field matching is going to match all of our different tables and lists that we entered into our system inside of this field matching. So just like the way that we filter on our reporting screen, we might say that, I'm looking at inventory metrics for a specific product. I can just search that specific product. So here what we're doing is mapping them so that those graphs and pivot tables can automatically update. So once I filter our product, you'll see all of these lists are going to dynamically update. So here we have our inventory metrics. We're going to map our inventory metrics to the product. So this is product variant. That's what it's called, product. We have product variant, and product. You don't have to necessarily set all of these. Sometimes you won't, because sometimes you don't have matching data and you just have two separate pieces of your dashboard that don't necessarily connect, and that's fine. So you might not always field map here, but I'll click on save. So we have our product. Then we need our warehouse. So I'll add another one, which is also going to be a relation, and this is going to be our warehouse. This is going to be filtered on warehouses. And now we see that our inventory metrics, and we made sure that all of these were grouped or able to be grouped by warehouse before we inserted them. So sometimes we found something that was not easily grouped by warehouse. Maybe it was just by location. So we made sure we found the report that had it grouped by warehouse. Then we can set a default value, which we won't, and we don't need to restrict the domain, so we can save that. So now we have two filters. The last one we want to do is our date range. So here we're going to add a new date range. We can do a timed, so month, quarter, relative period, or from to. And here I'm going to do from to. Now I'm just going to name this date range. And then we have our field mapping, our inventory metrics. This is the date field, so we want to select what the inventory metrics are. So our inventory metrics here, we said that they're going to be static as of today or as of whenever we're viewing the report, so we don't need to set one. Remember, I said sometimes you won't set these. Our sales metrics are going to be based on the date range, so we want to make sure we set this. So we can do this based on, the confirmation date. So we'll just do order date here. Then there's going to be a period offset. So we'll talk more about that, but because we want to get that year -1 and year -2 data, we're going to reinsert these sales metrics for year -1 and year -2. And then we're going to be able to set the offset here. So we'll pull in the previous period instead of the current period. And then we have our inventory resupply. So all of our product moves, we can do this based on the date. So we'll do date scheduled or the deadline. Let's just do the date scheduled with no offset. So now we'll save that. So as I mentioned, we're going to have to reinsert this sales metrics for year -1 and year -2. So we'll go ahead and go to our data, and we'll click on our sales metrics. And we'll go to action here. We're going to click on duplicate. And we're going to call this year -1. And we'll go here again and we'll duplicate. And we'll call this year -2. And then we'll go back to our filters. And under our date range, we'll go to field mapping. And for our inventory metrics, or rather for our sales metrics here, we have year -1 and year -2. And I'm going to say that we're going to do based on that order date still. And the offset is going to be previous, and we're going to select our period. So previous 1 period for whatever the date range we selected. And we're going to do the same thing here, but this is going to be year -2. So I'll say the previous period, so 2 previous periods ago. So now I'll save that. And then from our product and warehouses, we don't need to mess with those because we're not going to reference anything in that product or warehouses based on the 2 pivot tables that we just entered in or duplicated. Now I'm going to rename these just for simplicity here. So we have our sales metrics. We have our sales metrics copy. This is going to be year -1, or rather year -2. Y -2, and we have our Y -1. I'll remove the name copy, and we should be good to go. All right. So I'm going to remove, actually, let's go ahead and let's look at some of our filters and how they work, because they'll work just like they will on the dashboard right inside of here. So let's go to, for example, our inventory metrics. So inside of inventory metrics, let's say we want to filter this down just for our product A, black small. You'll see that automatically updates. We can add a few different products if we wanted to. Super handy. So if I just want to look at all of my data for product A, all of my different variants, I could do that here. I can also add the product template so I can see everything that has a specific product template. So I'll just remove these. Again, if we do warehouse, store one, and product black small, so now we only see store one data as well as the total. Same thing works for the date range. All right, so I think we have all of the default data we need. The next thing to do is actually build this out. So the first thing we're going to do is enter in a new on-hand quantity. So we'll go to our dashboard, we'll click on insert here, and we're going to insert a new chart. Now on the right side of the screen, when we click on a new chart, we're going to default to a chart type. We're going to adjust this to the chart that we want. And here under miscellaneous, we're going to see this little scorecard, and that's what we're going to utilize. Now the key value is going to be what data are we looking at in order to insert this. So to do that, just like we've seen in our previous formulas, or previous examples in our dashboards, we're going to have to make a new little spreadsheet that's going to reference different parts of these totals based on the provided value from whoever's viewing this dashboard. So let's take a look. All right, so let's create a new spreadsheet. We'll just call this metrics. We'll drag this over. And now the first thing we're going to need, and we'll just kind of name this. So we're going to need the on-hand quantity. So we'll call this on-hand. We'll need available. We'll need reserved. Stock coverage. And that's our inventory metrics. Then we're going to need values. We'll do the same thing here. We're not going to focus on making this pretty because we just need to reference this. So we need our sales metrics, values, and we need units sold, year -1, units sold year -2, and we need our average growth. All right, then the last thing we need is our financial metrics. And we'll do values, and we're going to do revenue, cost, what we have, margin and discount. All right, so now it's time to pull in the values that we need. This is the fun part. So now, how do we get this? So we know we need our on-hand quantity for whatever it is that we selected in our filters. And we also know that if we go over to our inventory metrics, for example, or we go into, let's go to our inventory metrics, we know that the system is going to automatically filter this down. So what we need for our on-hand quantity is just the quantity field for the specific field that we're looking for. So we're going to reference pivot table 1, and we'll look at the total for the store that's selected. So if we go here, we can just say equals pivot value. The pivot table ID is 1. We're going to look at the quantity field. We're going to say the warehouse ID. So what are we looking for? What's the domain? So the warehouse ID, actually, we don't necessarily need to insert what we're filtering down because the system is going to filter it down for us because we're going to select some of those filters. So we kind of can just do the quantity sum and then leave it at that. And that 361 is giving us the total of all quantities, 361. But as soon as we were to do this filter here, so I'm going to remove this and say filter. And if I just filter this down by a specific product, so product A, it's going to give me the total for product A, the quantity for product A. And then if I were to further filter this by just store 1, it's going to be 9. So if I go back to my metrics, we see 9. So that's all we have to do to get that data. So I'm just going to do the same thing here for the available data. So I'll do equals pivot.value. And we're going to do our inventory metrics. Again, this is all named very easily for us. We see it here. So I can go through a list, use my up and down arrows, go next. I want my available quantity, and that's all. Next, I'm going to do my reserve stock. So pivot.value and inventory metrics. Once again, my measurement name is my reserve quantity, and I'm going to get that value. Now, the stock coverage is a calculation. So we're going to need to figure out how we do that calculation. And there's going to be some considerations. Do we want to force someone to pick only one product at a time, which is going to allow us to have a more accurate view of the stock coverage? So we're just going to leave these calculated values to the end. So let's just skip over that. Units sold now. So now we need units sold. Units sold is the same concept. We go to our sales metrics, and we're going to do the same thing. So all we need to do is say equals, and we're going to do pivot.value. Pivot table now is sales metrics, so it's 2, and we're going to get the ordered quantity, and we'll copy that down. So there was 1 order for product A for store 1. Again, if we removed our and we changed it, we're going to get those values. So now if we do large, it's going to update based on whatever we sold in each one of those stores. So say store 4 here, just to make sure that we have some data. So now under units sold, we're going to do the same thing, but this time we're going to use our year -1 data. And this is going to be 0 because we don't have any previous data, but still going to do it. Actually, so, okay, so we didn't select a date range, so we're going to need to select a date range for that. And let's just make sure that we have the proper data. So this should be 0. Actually, I might have entered in, so let's see if I might have entered in previous year data. So let's go to this right here, and let's say, we'll drag this down. We'll copy the formula, and this one's just going to be pivot table number 5. All right, so let's see what we did wrong. So, all right, actually the mistake that I made was this from to field. It should actually be our month quarter. So I'm going to update that to month quarter, and that's going to allow us to select month and quarter range that we want to look at. And then we're going to get our offset value. So as soon as I save this, we should see these update to 0. And I just need to select my period. So if I do Q4 here, 2025, we'll see our year 1, year 2 fields update. So I'm just going to do 2025. Or I can do January 2025. Again, that's going to be 0 because I don't have any year -1 or year -2 sales from January 2025. All right, so fix that. Let's just make sure we have all of our field mapping correct, and we'll save. All right, so we have our year 2, year 1, and then we are going to have our average growth, which we will not set at this point. Let's just move on to revenue. So in order to get the revenue, we have our financial metrics here. So same thing, we want to get our revenue. So we're going to get our total, we're going to get our margin, and we're going to get our discount percentage. So let's go back to our metrics for revenue. I spelled that wrong. We're going to do pivot.value. Our pivot table ID is going to be 3, our financial metrics. Our measurement is going to be our price total, so that's our revenue. We get that, $4,000. Then we're going to get our margin. Here we're going to do pivot.value, financial metrics. We're going to do our margin here. It's also $4,000. And of course, that is because we have 0 product set. So if we wanted to calculate this one, all we have to do is this. minus this. Now we have 0 for our cost, and our discount, we're going to have our pivot.value, and we're going to do pivot number 3. Measure name is discount, and we'll save that. So this discount is in percentage, and it's the average discount. And if we go here, we see it's in percentage. So we can update this to be a percent field. We'll update this to be a monetary field. And we have our data. So these are all set. So now we need to calculate our average growth and our stock coverage. So for our growth, we'll just look at our units sold, and we'll look at the previous year just for simplicity. So we'll do, and now actually we're going to be dividing by 0. So we might want to say here, if pivot table value, let's do this, and we'll say, so if it's 0, right, then we're going to add, or if it's not 0, we'll add our pivot table value. Otherwise, we'll add 0. And we'll do the same thing for this. So let's just copy this over, and we'll change this to 5. And now we want to say units sold. We'll just say, we want to make sure that we're not dividing by 0. So we'll say if the year minus 1. So if there's a value here, then we will do our growth, which is just going to be our units sold this year divided by our units sold last year. So we'll just do this divided by this. Oops. D3. Otherwise, we'll just say 0. And let's just make sure that this is right. So here we have our average growth, which is 200%, and we want to make this a percentage. And I'm just going to switch this back. Okay. Okay, so for our stock coverage, we're going to need to calculate the average sales over a specific period of time that was entered in by the user. And there's a couple of different variables here, so I just wrote a formula that I'll paste in. But essentially, we need to account for a quarter, which is going to be 90 days, a month, which will be 30 days, or no period selected, which will be 365 days for the year. So in this case, we're going to say, we're going to just, first we need to grab this value. In order to grab this value, we can do Odoo.filter value, and we're going to pull in whatever we're looking for. So whether it's the product, warehouse, or date range. So you can use these filters to dynamically show information or to filter information. So here I have the date range. So it's going to be 2025. And this is in cell B7. So this is, we can just call this date value. Now I need to use this in order to calculate what my stock coverage is going to be. So here I'll do stock coverage days, and I'm just going to paste in a formula, and this is going to give me the value. So now I know for my stock coverage, I'm just going to take the units that are available and divide it by the stock coverage days. So here we're just going to do the available quantity. So we have none available in this store. Actually, and this 10 reserved. So let's go to a different store. Okay, so we have availability. So I just want to make sure that we can, oops, store 4, and I'll do equals our available quantity. Once again, I chose the wrong store, so let's do store 1. We'll do equals 9 divided by our 365 or whatever our stock coverage days is. And that's going to give us our stock coverage. Okay, so we have our values here. We have our date value. We have our stock coverage. We have our reserve quantity. We have all of the values that we need in order to make our dashboard. So now I'm going to go to my dashboard. Again, really start the fun stuff. I'm going to go ahead and edit this. So the first thing we're going to do, again, is our inventory metrics. So I can write out a header. Let's do, I want to remove our grid lines. So remove grid lines. I'm going to say this is our inventory metrics. And we'll just make this bigger. Again, we can make this look nicer, but we'll just kind of continue on here for the sake of time. This is a very long video. So this one is going to be our on-hand quantity. We're going to do a scorecard. We can design this. We'll give it a background color. So that's, let's do a custom color. Okay. And the chart title is going to be on hand. Make this bold. We can go back to configurations, and our value for this is going to be in our metrics. It's going to be this value here, and click on confirm. We can make this bigger. We'll keep it at 9.0 in case we have some other options or other variants. So we'll just leave that like that. Again, you can make this prettier. We can have a baseline value as well. So if you wanted to have a baseline value to something else in the system, you can set that, like the year 2 value. I'm going to leave it blank. But we can set our baseline value here. We can change this to a progress bar, percent change from value, or an absolute value of the increase. And then here we can link this to a specific menu in the system. So if I wanted this to go to our, let's go to stock, inventory report stock. Now, once I click this, it will bring us to stock. All right. So now I need to do this a few more times for the rest of my values. So here I have my on hand, I need my available. So I'll just go ahead and copy this, paste it. You'll see the grid lines pop up to lock that in. I'm going to do here, this is going to be available. And my key metrics here is going to be our available quantity. So that's going to be B3, and I can confirm this. So on hand and available. We can change the color if we want. Honestly, don't like the color I chose. And let's update that. As you can see, I'm spending time on things that don't necessarily matter for this video, but I just wanted to make it look at least a little bit nice. All right. So now I have my available, my on hand. The next thing I need is my reserved quantity. Again, I can copy this over, paste it, kind of move that around. This is going to be reserved. My configurations here is going to be my metric, my next one here. So it's going to be B4. And then again, duplicate this. So copy, paste. And this one is going to be B5. Design here is going to say, where was it? Stock coverage. Let's make that a little bit bigger. Okay. So we can actually add a description here. So I can say weeks. Well, this is days. So I'll add days. Here I can say units. Oops. This I'll say units as well. And here I'll say units. All right. So we're starting to make some progress here. Oops. Edit. Make these a little bit smaller because it was bothering me. All right, now we're cooking. Next thing we need to do is the same thing, but for our sales metrics. So I'll just come down here. I'm going to say sales metrics. I'm just going to go through this quickly, and I'll speed up the video as I go through the rest of this just because it's all repetitive at this point. All right, so I have my data here. I'm going to remove some of these extra columns. And what I'm going to do now is just insert our last bit, which is this inventory resupplies. So I'm just going to copy this over. I'll say this is inventory resupply. And now I'm just going to insert my list. In this case, I'm going to have to insert a dynamic one. So I'm going to do data, inventory resupply. I'll just do top 10. And here we have our data. So we can adjust this depending on what we want there. So we can delete items. And I'm going to actually remove, let's see, what do we want to remove? So we probably want all of this data. Quantity, demand, and let's see if this updates. Let's just make sure. Okay, so perfect. We can redesign this, but again, this video is long enough, so I will just leave it as is. I'm just going to adjust some of these, make it fit better. All right, so we have our metrics. We have our data. We can actually delete all of these if we wanted to. They don't need to be here. Only thing we need is this metrics tab, and it's going to calculate everything for us. So the last thing we need to do is just insert this and add it to our dashboard. So I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to say Add to Dashboard, and we're going to call this our product dashboard. We can do it anywhere we want. Let's just do it in logistics. We can add the access rights group, and we click on Create here. So now I have my inventory. So I could have removed some of the space at the top, made this a little bit prettier. We see we got an error on our stock coverage because we don't have any products or warehouses selected. So I should probably add an if error there. So here we'll say Q4 2025 store 1. Now we see all of our revenue, everything set up. Let's do store 3. So some of them don't have revenue. So actually let's do Q1 and we'll do store 1. So there's going to be some formatting things we want to do, but now we see all of our products, store 1 Q1 2025, and let's just look at one product, or let's do, trying to find something where we have stock. So, okay. There we go. So we'll do store 4, product A, red small. All right. So we have one inventory move that'll link us right to that inventory move. We have our cost from revenue, financial metrics. That's going to link us to wherever we set it. I just copy and pasted some of these. So this is bringing me to sales data. This is our on-hand quantity. So we can adjust them however we see fit. But we now have a dashboard with all of the key metrics that we're looking for that is filterable at the top of our screen. So this is a simple example. This is an example that I can come up with off the top of my head. But again, depending on what you want to look at, you're going to be able to make those. So the last thing I want to do is just go through an example of, like, let's go ahead and go into store 4 and we'll sell another unit. It's currently Q1 2025. So we'll be able to sell one. This should increase to 1. We have 10 units on hand and 10 units available. So we have 10 reserved. So maybe we do a different product, or I'll just update the quantity. So we'll go to products. We'll do our product A. I think it was red small, but either case, it doesn't necessarily matter. I'm going to update our quantity. So let's just go to red small. And we want to go to store 4, I believe. So store 4, red small. And I'm going to say we have 11 units. and I'm going to go into sales. I'll select my customer. I'm going to go to store 4 here. I'm going to add our product. Let's do variants. Red small. All right. So we have forecast stock 11, available 1. I'm going to save this. I'm going to click on confirm, and we'll deliver this out. And now if we go back to our dashboard at any moment or any time that we go back to our dashboard, we'll click into dashboards here. We'll go to our product dashboard. And again, we can filter this down by Q1 2025, store 4, and we'll do that product A red small. Now we have this updated to 11 units. We still have 10 on hand, 10 available, 10 reserved because we added 1 and then we just sold 1. And we have revenue increase, our cost increase, our margin, and any discounts. So we can actually test the discounts as well if we wanted to. But I think that's enough for this video. I think you get the gist of the power of Odoo Sheets. Please let me know if you have any questions.